So back to our mini course. So we've done the course calendar document, manage dates, calendar widget, news items. Another place that you should look is in the Dropbox. So the Dropbox has actually 3 dates available on a Dropbox. So I'm going to go ahead and click the drop down and select Edit next to the first Dropbox. And under Restrictions, you'll see that you can have 3 separate dates set on each Dropbox item. So a start date when the Dropbox is available, has due date, the due date when the assignment needs to be submitted by to be considered on time, and also an end date when the Dropbox folder gets locked up. So no students can submit assignments after the end date. They can submit them late between the due date and the end date, or on time between the start date and the due date. So some instructors use all 3 of these. Personally, I usually just use start date and end date. And then if a student wants to make a late submission, I have a separate Dropbox for that. But you might see some instructors and some course shells using all 3 of these. And the important thing to know is that only the start date and the end date actually show up under the Manage Dates tool. So this due date will not get adjusted, and you're going to need to go in and make sure that if due date's being used, that you manually adjust that date. And it's pretty straightforward. You just go ahead and, if it was activated, you can click on the calendar, and you can scroll over to the appropriate day and click on it. As far as time goes, what I usually do is something that's released on a particular date, I set the time to be 12:01 a.m. So the first minute on that day, I generally make the thing available. And something that's due, I generally make it due at 11:59 p.m. on that day, so the last possible day. So, I'm sorry, the last possible minute of that day. So, for example, has start date if I wanted 4/8 to be the start date. Actually, let's look at this. So this one is a letter about copyright resources, which I believe is in week 1. And we know week 1 runs from 5/5. So we're going to go ahead and go to 5/5. And I'm going to make this available at 12:01 a.m. So first possible minute of the day. Actually make it 12 o'clock a.m. And then it's going to be due on 5/12. So I'm going to make it due on 5/12 at 11:59 p.m. And then during the second week, I'll let them submit the assignment late, but the actual drop dead date for submitting assignments is going to be on the last day of class, which is 5/19. So 5/19 at 11:59 p.m. So after I've adjusted those dates, I can go ahead and select Save and Close. I actually don't want to set these dates right now because we're going to do that in a later task, so I'll just hit Cancel for now. And I also want to check the dates on this copyright scenarios. So once again, these don't have dates enabled. So the last thing we're going to check is submission views, and submission views are associated with quizzes. So if you go to the Quizzes tab and click on a quiz to edit it, you'll see a tab for submission views. And none of the quizzes in the OIO mini course have submission views. So rather than look at these, let's look at my course, which actually does use submission views. So if I go to Quizzes tab and pick one of these exams, so Exam 1, Submission Views, you'll see that there's a default view in which the student is not shown their answers, or their answers are the correct answers when they submit the quiz. Instead, on the last day of the exam, after the exam period closes actually, a new submission view activates that shows all the questions with user responses. So the way this works is that during the exam period, students can't review their answers and can't share their answers with other students in the class. But after the exam closes, then they can see their answers and the correct answers so that they can go in and ask any questions about why they got something wrong. So the way I set this up is the default view has no to show questions, where the release answer submission view has a date restriction, 1201, the day after the exam closes, and I'm going to show the questions, and I'm also going to show the user responses. I'm going to show the answers to the questions, and I'm going to show their score on the question. So the important thing to know about this is that this date in the view restrictions does not appear under managed dates either. So if you have a course shell that uses submission views, you have to remember to manually adjust the date in the submission view by going to the quiz, checking the submissions view tab, and if there are any additional views, you'll be able to adjust them there. And you're going to want to do that for all of your quizzes. So that's it for adjusting dates, which is one of the more complicated topics you'll have to deal with when you get a takeover course shell. One thing that I've found handy is I've actually created in my course shell a draft module called Administration for Instructors, and right at the top I have a Prepare for Term checklist. So here's a list of all of the things that I have to do each term when I want to prepare my course for teaching in the next term. And I recommend actually developing a document like this as well. It will save you time when you're preparing your course for the next term. And it will also help if you ever turn your course over to another instructor so that they can take it over. They'll have one place where they can look that will guide them through the process of getting their course adjusted.